Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Zac Williamson and Joe Andrews, co-founders of Aztec Network, the privacy-first layer 2 on Ethereum, here to discuss programmable privacy, zero-knowledge proofs, Aztec Network, and the Uniswap CCA auction and token sale that's going on right now. Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time, and I appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks for having us on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
likewise.
like
I've actually followed Aztec Network for a few years, and some of my friends that I've worked with over the years have been working on the project, and it's great to see it blowing up. And I think the privacy narrative overall in crypto right now, and for Ethereum, it's a great time to be launching. So, and we can dive into all that, but I just sort of love to start out high level on for those who aren't fully familiar with Aztec Network and the privacy part of it. What is the network? What does it do, and why does it matter so much?
Should I start with that one? So Aztec is a privacy-preserving layer 2 built on top of Ethereum. So what do we mean by that? We mean that we are recreating the smart contract style ecosystem of Ethereum, that world computer, but where private information is a first-class part of that network, where we use advanced zero-knowledge proofs to make that happen. Effectively a private world computer. And this is important because it opens up an entire universe of applications that benefit from distributed ledgers, benefit from decentralization, but require working with data that is sensitive that you cannot just throw on a transparent ledger. So we're talking about things like people's identities or sensitive data or just information that you don't want to be like sniped and viewed by bots, by data miners. And the end goal really is to bring Web2 style like functionality and user experiences into Web3 products and services.
Definitely. And do you believe that privacy is of becoming even more important now that larger enterprises and institutions are getting involved? Of course, individual privacy is important as well.
I got some views on this. I think it's kind of twofold. One is, blockchains are reaching more into the real world, and as they do that, we run into this, age-old problem of like people need privacy. The world relies on information asymmetries, and that's missing from most blockchains. And so I think that's one reason why this is kind of top of mind at the moment, is as we see all these new chains launch, these layer ones, these layer twos, and like some of them do start to get adoption, they run headfirst into this wall, which is we need privacy. And I think, yeah, the other side is obviously institutions are just noticing this industry growing, and wanting to get part in it. And when they try and replicate their flows on these public ledgers, they run into the same problem, which is, hey, this the thing that powers my business in Web 2, the information that I hold can't be public. Like that's how my business functions. And yeah, they run into the same problem of needing privacy. We kind of ran into this problem 6, 7 years ago when we were trying to put corporate debt onto Ethereum. So
Mm.
that's kind of how Aztec was created, like with this desire to build kind of a product on top of Ethereum, and realizing we couldn't. But I think that's the main reason, is that, yeah, there's increased adoption and just increased like eyes on crypto and blockchains in general, and they all see the same thing, which is it doesn't work without kind of strong privacy guarantees.
Definitely. And with that corporate debt, that's interesting. Way back now, we're seeing a huge surge in, real world assets actually being tokenized on Ethereum, different money market instruments and equities, and hopefully, the whole financial system and stock market will be on blockchain, if not on Ethereum. And with Aztec being a layer 2 on Ethereum versus a standalone chain, and having that foresight like 6, 7 years ago when you started developing it. Can you talk about the positioning in where the industry's at right now with Ethereum and Aztec as a layer 2 and how that fits in?
Yeah, I can start with that. I mean, the foresight was really just I mean, it was for us, it was pretty basic. It's, we're trying to do something extremely challenging, fully like private, privacy preserving smart contracts. So we didn't want to build our own consensus network, didn't want to build our own execution client the way that you have to do if you're not building on Ethereum. So for us, it was a no-brainer. Also, uh, privacy is not useful if you don't have liquidity. And Ethereum is, and I think will remain for some time, the canonical home of assets being issued. And so when it comes to your question about like the what was it? Sorry for forgetting. Like, was it you asking about the positioning of Ethereum today, and like where it stands in the general blockchain space? I think that Ethereum is a very unique value proposition that is very differentiated because it is a fully decentralized distributed network where governance is very pluralistic, it's very security conscious, and that does affect it, like the speed of Ethereum when it makes to make decisions, strategic shifts. However, despite all that, it's delivered some of the most technically ambitious updates ever seen from any blockchain. You know what's happening, particularly with the Visaka upgrade, effectively sharding realized something people have been talking about for years is incredible. And so you just have this profound concentration of talent on Ethereum because it is genuinely decentralized and composable and permissionless. You don't need to ask permission to build in it. You know that there's not going to be like privileged stakeholders that are going to kind of undermine you or rug you. It's very unique, and I see it being, it won't be the fastest blockchain ever, but it will always be, I think, the most secure one that people are comfortable building on, and the one where for meaningful assets with like substantial value behind them is kind of the natural place to create and distribute them.
Yeah, in terms of for Aztec, I mean, we get to inherit that security as a ZK rollup and a validity rollup on Ethereum, and so as Zach was saying, kind of that not having to rethink consensus and kind of focus on building out the privacy side of things and augmenting Ethereum with privacy has kind of been kind of key to our strategy. Unlike most layer twos, like we're not just taking Ethereum and putting it on a like lower layer to make it cheaper or faster. We actually have different block space, and so we're kind of value additive to all of the Ethereum chains, like layer one and all of the layer twos. Like you can easily bridge from Aztec to any of these chains. And you can bridge not just value but information, and that's very powerful because it means you can plug into existing DeFi but add user privacy. So if I'm a user and I want to swap funds on Arbitrum, I can do that by routing my transaction through Aztec. And as a result, kind of Aztec is kind of value additive to most EVM chains, and that ecosystem is just growing. It's like it's about network effects really, and I think that's what's going to keep Ethereum on top for a long time, and why we're happy to kind of plug into that ecosystem and contribute privacy when we can.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And especially the growth and interest in Ethereum as a treasury asset this year and the market cap going up so rapidly and volatility in both directions. But it's been an exciting year for adoption overall. And, you know, the network effect is it's hard to compare. Maybe there's one other chain that we could compare potentially, but I think Ethereum has quite the lead. And, talking about developing on Ethereum. Say there was for example, there was a dApp or that wanted to, maybe it was already on Ethereum. Maybe there's developers that want to build something that's privacy centric. How do they go about starting with Aztec and integrating that privacy like from the beginning?
Yeah, maybe I can take a stab. So there's kind of, I think of it as like type one applications, and then type two is just as a mental model. And so for type one, these are like applications that exist not on Aztec. They're applications designed for the EVM. They're public applications. They were designed without privacy as a core primitive. And in those kind of applications, the capital and the app stays on its destination chain. So it's on Ethereum mainnet, it's on Arbitrum, it's on Base. In that flow, all a developer needs to do is build a simple interface that lets a user route their transaction through Aztec. And so you need to build an application that attracts a user, but you don't need to rebuild Uniswap. And when you do that, you get privacy because you can bridge when you bridge out of Aztec, you can't see who sent the transaction. You can then start to augment those with kind of like additional logic. So you can say, okay, this transaction came from Aztec, and I also get a guarantee that the person who sent it has a UK passport. So you can start to do kind of like conditional confidential logic as like a gateway into building on
Mhm.
Aztec. But this is really still kind of like in the camp of type one applications. It's like the design space is existing public DeFi that we
Mhm.
kind of know and love. For type two applications, these are like Aztec native applications. And here you get to really leverage the power of having kind of privacy as a first class primitive or private state as a first class primitive. In that model, you have to deploy a smart contract onto Aztec. You use our programming language Noir, which is a Rust kind of Rust-like DSL, and you can then leverage kind of much more feature-rich applications that can't exist in a public execution environment.
Mhm.
The best example to maybe illustrate the difference that I like to share is around Uniswap is obviously a public DEX. It's the ratio of two public variables to create a price. An OTC desk is an inherently private application or a dark pool, and you can't do an OTC desk without an intermediary on Ethereum. On
Mhm.
Aztec, you can because it's hiding who the buyer is, who the seller is, how much they're buying or selling, or the price, and you can kind of compose that in any way you want as a developer. And so it's these types of net new applications that are kind of type two on Aztec that we're excited about. Both will obviously drive transaction throughput on Aztec. I think it's very easy to just bring privacy to existing applications, but this like net new type of application is, I think how we bring the world on chain over the next kind
Mhm.
of like 1 to 5 years.
That's very cool. And uh, that is a perfect example of the OTC networks. I was actually just going to ask about the early use cases because OTC, especially with more money coming in, sometimes they don't, especially if you have a lot of money, you don't want to just go on a DEX and make a huge market buy because it can really move the market depending on how much you're spending. But at the same time, you don't want to just either trust a third party or give away all your information that you might be spending 1 billion on a coin, and you want that privacy aspect. So to go further with that, with the early use cases, like for example the OTC desk or other things, where is that actually at with? Um, is it possible to be that it's already built or it can be built today?
Well, we've already built an OTC disk proof of concept, which is live on our testnet, I believe.
Mm,
So yeah, we have ecosystem partners building this stuff out for production settings. Ideally when we launch, if not shortly afterwards, like when transactions go live. But yeah, this stuff isn't completely possible to build
mhm,
today. Like the privacy primitives are built out where you can do these swaps privately, and we're also building out the layers of the identity stack so that even um, like regulated entities can perform some of this. I think the first kind of keystone piece of technology for this is ZkPassport, again, an ecosystem
mhm,
project where I think with our token sale, we're the first users of this product on chain, where we're using these zero knowledge passport proofs to validate that users aren't on an OFAC list, and also that they're unique users. Because in Aztec, because we want a fair token sale, we're capping how much individuals can bid, and then we're using ZkPassport as Sybil protection, which is not something that's been
mhm.
possible before on blockchain. So this is kind of like the first time that the identity stack is starting to be integrated into a public blockchain, and we're going to see a lot more of that over the next few years.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how Ethereum itself evolves with privacy. And I didn't, you guys probably are following it closer than me, but I didn't see the exact details. But it seemed like in the most recent Ethereum DevCon, plus the new Ethereum updates that just happened this week, there's more of a privacy aligning with privacy. Does it seem like the vision of Ethereum on the privacy aspect and Aztec are sort of like merging into one?
I absolutely think so. I think to be a little bit arrogant, I think that the Ethereum community is starting to see what we saw several years ago, which is that if you don't have privacy, this is just surveillance technology.
Hmm.
And the scope of the applications that you can build on a blockchain are very restricted because you have to be comfortable with everything being public. And we've reached a point, we've reached a threshold where A, this is now a very critical barrier to growth, and B, The actual technology, privacy technology, is now advanced enough that people can start to actually think about a future that incorporates it. Whereas before, when I was talking about privacy 5 years ago, it was much more hypothetical because we had to do a lot of, like us and the rest of the community had to do a lot of original research to get the technology to the point where you can actually build useful systems with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to see. And I guess, it's worth mentioning, you mentioned there that without privacy, it's a surveillance technology. And part of maybe a subsector, a niche of the crypto industry that are very privacy focused, or at least the inceptions of the crypto industry back in the day in the silk and dark markets and stuff, that privacy was like, what, it's a balance. Like, is it you want privacy because there's illicit activity, or you just want privacy because privacy is a human right and you want to protect your personal information? And from what I understand with Aztec, it's private but compliant, right? Privacy but compliance merged together.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, there's a spectrum here, and what we think is most important. So what I say when I talk about Aztec and like how I want it to be used, I'm giving a very like biased opinion about what I think is
Mhm.
like important, what's valuable. But in order for any of these ideas to be brought into life, it's very important that the actual network layer itself is completely neutral and doesn't
Mhm.
care about any of this. As
Mhm.
in, this is a debate that other people should have. And I think that like ASIC's responsibility is to make sure that there's a completely neutral network where it's permissionless, it's private, there's no kind of central custodian of the network that can see what's going on.
Mhm.
And I want to make sure that on our network, we can provide the tools and the technologies to allow app developers to build compliant apps if they
Mhm.
need to, if they want to. I want to make sure that there's tools and technologies so that application developers can ensure their users know that they're not helping bad actors, because I think that's important. But um, I do want to just preface, like to kind of separate that from what the actual network is doing and enabling,
Mhm.
because yeah, that neutrality, it's extremely important for us. And that's why we're deploying like day one fully decentralized.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can go a bit further. I mean, like you can view it as a bit of a spectrum. Like, so Ethereum has the same neutrality. And you can build privacy apps on Ethereum. It's just very difficult. They're not
Mhm.
composable, and you have to have a team like Aztec to be able to do it.
Mhm.
And so like Aztec is a privacy app on Ethereum. To think of it in another way, and we chose Ethereum because it's neutral. It can't be stopped, and it's a great home for those types of applications. Um, the only difference between like us and Ethereum in that case is that we've made it easier for developers to build those applications by building tools that are specific for the job. So we have Noir, we have loads of primitives, loads of libraries, loads of great dev tools that mean that you don't have to be a cryptographer anymore to write an application. You
Mhm.
can just write a function and put private above it,
Mhm.
and it becomes a private function. And this is very powerful because, it gives developers these tools and they can decide for their use case how they need to follow the
Mhm.
rule book. If you're a game that's trading kind of meaningless assets or like a social network, you don't need to have compliance over the assets because
Mhm.
you just have information. If you have USDC and you have like a federally regulated like asset, you're going to have a very different level of kind of compliance you have to kind of adhere to. And yeah, the goal of the network is to give developers the tools to make that choice. And there's a huge spectrum of things they can implement to do that. So I think another way of thinking about it as well is this question of kind of like how do you deal with compliance or illicit activity comes up a lot. And I think the reason it comes up is because the early days of kind of privacy on blockchains were very primitive.
Mhm.
And what you could really do was encrypt a balance. Like we lived through this. We had earlier versions of Aztec, and you couldn't build a fully functioning programmable smart contract. You could have a poor like version of privacy basically, where you could only do a limited amount of compute. Now
Mhm.
you have like Turing complete smart contracts. You can do what Zac was saying earlier. You can tie your identity to your cryptocurrency account with tools like ZkPassport, and that actually really helps kind of boost the compliance you can add to an app if your app needs it. And I think it's a bit strange to think about because sometimes you're like, wait, if I put my identity on a blockchain, that's going to be public. I don't want to do that. But you kind of have to make that step sometimes to actually get more privacy, which is a little bit of a jump people have to go through.
Well, it's all
Yeah.
encrypted,
Yeah.
but yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I feel like, yeah, there's definitely a balance, but at some point, if if you want to transact a large amount of money, I think it's unreasonable that everyone thinks that they could just be completely anonymous. And now X has even implemented, which country you're from, even if you have an anonymous account. Although I bet that could probably be improved with ZK proofs somehow.
Oh, immensely. I mean, the current X thing, in my opinion, is going to create more problems than it solves long term because it's very easy to bypass with VPNs. So if you're actually like
Hmm.
a bad actor, so let's say you're in, I don't know, you're somebody in Sri Lanka that's like just like spreading American fake news and rage bait because it gets engagement and money, right? Like, well, you're gonna use a VPN, you're gonna make it pretend like you're in America pretty easily. And so I think this will just catch out. Um, like the people who aren't creating problems. And we're already starting to see on X, right? Like it's created this dynamic. People are like, oh, look, this person's a foreigner. He's not one of us. So, I mean, with ZK technology, yeah, you can actually like, you could, if you want to go down that road, you can make it much more robust so that, you can't get around to the VPNs. You could use things like passports saying, okay, you gotta show me your citizenship to get like a flag next to your profile. Um, but yeah, I think jury's still very out on whether that's actually going to be a good thing or not.
Definitely. I want to jump back to the network. A few points you mentioned that the OTC app could be running, on the test net right now. And then I know, the huge news of the show, which we should talk about more, is the live CCA clearing auction with Uniswap. We did mention Uniswap, and then the token launch and the main launch of the whole network. Can you talk about this? Because this is very unique. I haven't seen this before. Uniswap continuous clearing auction versus traditional token sale.
Yeah, maybe I can take a stab at like starting with the network and then getting into the auctions. So we, as we said earlier, we wanted to make sure that Aztec was credibly neutral and this privacy wasn't controlled by anyone. And as a result, we strongly kind of believe in decentralizing the network. That doesn't mean just decentralizing kind of who's running the nodes and the sequencing. It also means decentralizing governance and economic ownership of the network. And so when it came time to launch the network, we were looking at different mechanisms on how to do this. And there's obviously airdrops, there's traditional token sales, and they all didn't really fit the bill because they either, in an airdrop, you kind of give away tokens for free, and that doesn't really work in a proof of stake network where people need to have skin in the game. And traditional token sales usually have a multitude of problems around bots taking all the tokens, sniping, gas wars, whales. They're actually quite bad for distributing tokens. They're
Mhm.
good for raising money if you create the right dynamic, but they're bad for distributing tokens to a broad base of people. And we ended up speaking to Uniswap because they were building this new auction type called a continuous clearing auction. And so over the last 3 months, we've kind of helped them launch it as a core contributor. And the goals of the auction are to have an auction that lasts multiple days. And over the course of that auction, determine a fair price for the token.
Hmm.
And as a result, you remove all of these kind of gas wars or whale attacks or sniping that come about from traditional auctions, just based on the auction mechanic. And it's a really new novel mechanism, but I think in the next kind of 1 to 2 years, it will become a default for token launches. And it's just an exciting thing to see it live. We're the first project to go through it as a kind of live token launch.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think the auction methods can be more fair for sure. I think there's been a lot of attempts over the past 7, 8 years on, different mechanisms. And I have seen some auctions in different ways, not with this CCA style, but they seem like they're successful. And then after that, it's just a matter of after you're live, that's the whole next step. And you guys have been running this, it's only open for a few more days. What is that next step like after it's closed and like, where the real work begins?
Yeah. So I mean, I can start, Joe. Maybe you can continue. So the next step is we're currently going through our internal audits of the network. So Ignition is currently live on Ethereum mainnet, where the Aztec network is producing blocks, but the block gas limit is zero because we're still finishing our audits. We're validating everything is secure. And then ideally, when that happens, sequences on the network will vote to increase the gas limit on Aztec, sorry, mana limit. And then the network will be live. We already have, I think it's like 18, 20 people building ecosystem partners building applications on Aztec. And our goal over the next 18 months is to basically just increase the developer experience of Aztec, increase the downstream user experience, scale the network, reduce the block times, improve its security. There's an enormous amount of work that is going to be ongoing, just like Ethereum today is nothing like it was in 2016.
Mhm.
We're going to constantly be pushing this state of the art here because, as you said, like the hard work is only just beginning. And we want to make sure that the Aztec network is as easy to build on top of as Ethereum or Solana. We want to make sure that it's completely scalable. We're building an application-specific L3 rollup stack on top of it called the Aztec stack, so that you can do extraordinarily fast applications for things like micropayments or
Mhm.
AI intent payment settlement stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like it's a big world out there, and we just want to take what we want to do fundamentally is take a lot of economic activity that's not happening on chain right now and to bring it into Aztec, as opposed to the current model of L2s, alt L1s, where you're trying to like kind of almost like parasitically steal other people's liquidity on chain.
Mhm.
We're not interested in that. We want to do completely new stuff.
Yeah. No, I
In
agree.
terms of the token side, so yeah, the sale lasts for 2 and a bit more days, I mean, maybe 2 days now actually by the time this goes out. And yeah, by the end of the auction, it will find a fair market price. Then there's a Uniswap V4 pool that's created at that price. And then effectively the token's not transferable in that pool for a few kind of months. And then early next year, coinciding with network launch, TGE will happen, and you can then use the token for fees on the network. And before then, you can stake it on the Ignition chain to make sure that everything's working as intended on mainnet, gearing up to the enablement of transactions. So, yeah, it's going to be a busy kind of Christmas period as all of this wraps up and we finish our audits. But it's good to have something else to do over the holidays other than just eat turkey and drink too much eggnog or other things like that. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, definitely. That's exciting. And I feel the same way. I think the regular 9 to 5 people, they're like they can't wait for a break. And we're like, we just want to keep going. Like it's nice to have other things to do, but like we just love this technology so much. And I know there's so much more to be built with, if we're gonna change and evolve the financial system and the world with this tech that there's lots to be done. So I'm glad to see you guys, at this stage and all to your future success.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be on, and I agree completely with you. We need to bring all of the world's finance and activities onto blockchain. Get it out of the hands of these centralized data custodians and third parties we can't trust.
Definitely. And one last thing about the auction as well. You mentioned earlier about the ZK passports. We were talking about it. From what I understand, you've actually introduced that into it's like you're using the technology with the auction. Do you actually get to use the ZK passports?
Yeah, so there's kind of I think it's the first time you can prove you're not on a sanctions list, you're not a terrorist by taking a ZkPassport proof, make that proof locally on your phone, and you send it to an Ethereum smart contract to verify before you can participate in the auction. If you don't have a passport that works with ZkPassport or an ID card, you can always use traditional Web2
Mhm.
credentials to get through. But it's really exciting to see this kind of new way of actually doing these checks and doing it in a way where, your data can't be like lost in a data breach. Like so many
Hmm.
times, you send a photo of your passport to a server and it could just get hacked in 2 years. And as a
Yeah.
result, it's just like a really poor end user experience. And so yeah, I'm just excited to see this new way of doing things. It's the same technology that lets you go into countries. And so like, we have these signatures in our passports and these NFC chips that we go through e-gates with. And now you can kind of view Ethereum a bit like an e-gate. And we can validate these proofs there. And so I think it's going to be very commonplace in the next year that this will be just a norm. And that's another thing that's on the exciting list for 2026.
That's super exciting. Yeah, I'd love to e-gate into every potential 100x unicorn investment, make it as easy as possible, and use ZK technology at the same time. That's super cool. Gentlemen, thank you. And what's the best way for people to follow along with these updates of like the entire network as well as just the token sale for while it lasts?
Yeah, so X is probably the best for just general updates. We're Aztec Network on X, and then for the token sale specifically, it's sale.aztec.network. And you can kind of see the auction in real time there. You can see the tokens clearing continuously, which is kind of the whole point of CCA. And even if you're not bidding, it's a fun thing to watch. Yeah, it's fairly addicting watching the tokens stream in real time.
Very cool. Thank you guys so much. I will leave those links in the description box below. Would love to follow up, post-launch, closer to the TGE and the main launch, and see what else because I feel like the possibilities are almost endless. There's so many things that need to be updated with more privacy, and I'm glad you guys have been, doing well so far. And all the best to you guys over the holidays. And let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. It's been great.